only 14 kilometers. That is about the same distance as from one end of a large city to the other. That is exactly what separates Europe from Africa at the narrowest point of the Strait of Gibraltar. It would seem that if you build a bridge, the two continents will be connected forever. But there is no bridge, and today we will figure out why this seemingly simple question is one of the most complex on the planet. Subscribe, it will be interesting. The Strait of Gibraltar has been known to people since ancient times. For the Greeks and Romans, it was the place where the known world ended. Here stood the legendary Pillars of Hercules, beyond which the unknown began. Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Arabs, Spaniards, and Portuguese all passed through this strait, traded, fought, and searched for new lands. The strait has always been not just water, but a real border between worlds. Even the very name of this place speaks of history. The word Gibraltar comes from an Arabic expression that means approximately the following: Mountain of Tariq. Tariq ibn Ziyad was an Arabic general who in the year 711 crossed the strait and began the conquest of Spain. Since then, this place has become a symbol of how nations and entire armies cross the borders between continents. Today, about 80,000 ships pass through the Strait of Gibraltar every year. This is one of the busiest sea routes on the planet. Tankers with oil, container ships with goods, passenger ferries, warships, all this moves in a continuous stream through the narrow corridor between the shores. The strait connects the Atlantic with the Mediterranean Sea, which means it links the ports of Europe, Asia, Africa, and America into a single trade network. When you look at a map, the idea of a bridge looks almost obvious. Here is Spain, here is Morocco. There is a very small distance between them. But the map does not show the main thing, what is happening under the surface of the water. And there, everything is arranged in such a way that engineers, having first studied the conditions in the strait, only shook their heads. And now, you will understand why. Let us start with the depth. In the narrowest point, the strait goes down about 300 meters. To understand whether this is a lot or a little, imagine a 30-story building. Now put 10 such buildings, one on top of the other. That is the thickness of the water over the bottom. Not a single bridge pillar can simply stand on such a bottom without colossal costs and engineering risk. But depth is only the beginning. The bottom of the strait is uneven and extremely complex in composition. There you find hard, rocky formations, soft soils, and underwater canyons that go even deeper. Finding reliable points for supports in such a relief is extremely difficult. Engineers would have to literally map every section of the bottom before making a decision on where exactly to place something. Now add the currents to this. In the Strait of Gibraltar, the water moves in two directions at the same time. On the surface, Atlantic water goes into the Mediterranean Sea, and deep below, the saltier and heavier Mediterranean water slowly flows in the opposite direction into the Atlantic. This is like a two-story river, and all this power would press on the bridge pillars every second, day after day, year after year. Add the wind to this. Famous local winds blow here, the Levant and the Poniente. The Levant blows from the east in sharp gusts and is capable of raising such waves that ferry service sometimes simply stops. A bridge in such a place would have to withstand constant lateral loads that over time literally shake any construction. And now the most alarming part: earthquakes. The strait is located in the collision zone of the African and European lithospheric plates. These plates move slowly towards each other, and it is this movement that periodically results in tremors. In the year 1755, One of the strongest earthquakes in European history occurred in this region, known as the Lisbon earthquake. It destroyed an entire city and gave rise to giant waves that reached the shores of Brazil. Building in such a zone is the same as erecting a house on a crack in the floor. And we should also mention seawater separately. It destroys metal and concrete much faster than fresh water. Salt literally eats constructions from the inside. That is why sea bridges require constant care, expensive protective coatings, and regular replacement of parts. A bridge across Gibraltar would become not just the construction of the century, but a maintenance project for entire centuries ahead. When engineers put all these factors together, a staggering amount is obtained. According to various calculations, the construction of a bridge across the Strait of Gibraltar would require from 10 to 15 billion euros, and taking into account inevitable unforeseen difficulties, possibly significantly more. And this is only construction, without taking into account the decades of subsequent maintenance. That is why engineers more often speak not of a bridge, but of a tunnel. The logic is simple. A tunnel goes under the bottom and does not interfere with ships. 80,000 vessels a year cannot simply go around or wait. Shipping in the strait does not stop in a storm or on a holiday. A tunnel would remove this problem completely. But a tunnel under Gibraltar has its own serious difficulty. To bypass the deepest parts of the seafloor and ensure a safe angle of descent and ascent for trains, the tunnel would have to be stretched to a length of about 38 kilometers. This is more than the distance across the entire center of such a metropolis as Paris or London. Imagine this path, only underwater, in the darkness, under pressure. For comparison, let us take the famous Eurotunnel under the English Channel between Britain and France. It was built for more than 6 years. It cost about $15 billion at the prices of that time, and opened in the year 1994. But there the engineers were lucky. A layer of soft chalk lies under the bottom of the English Channel, which is easy to drill. There is nothing like that under Gibraltar. There is another problem with the tunnel that is rarely spoken of. If you let cars through it, you will have to solve the task of ventilation for more than 30 kilometers. Exhaust gases in a closed space of such length is no longer a technical detail, but a question of life and death. That is why, in real projects, only a railway tunnel is seriously considered without personal cars. So, the technical difficulties are huge. But let us say honestly, humanity knows how to build in difficult conditions. It knows how to drill, deepen, strengthen, and protect from water and earthquakes. The real question is not whether it is physically possible. The question is whether the people who make decisions want it. And here, everything becomes truly interesting. Let us start with an unexpected fact. At the very south of Spain, right at the entrance to the strait, stands a rock. A small one, only about 6.5 square kilometers. About 34,000 people live on it. And this rock is called Gibraltar. It would seem what is special about it. But this tiny territory has been British for more than 300 years. Not Spanish, but precisely British. And it is the one that stands in the very center of this whole story. Britain captured Gibraltar in the year 1704 during a large European war for the right of succession to the Spanish throne. Since then, Spain has tried to return the rock several times, including by laying sieges for many years. But Gibraltar remained British. The residents voted twice in referendums in the years 1967 and 2002, and both times they chose to remain under the British flag. Why does Britain hold on to this rock so tightly? Because whoever controls Gibraltar controls the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea. This is a strategic point of world importance. Trade routes, warships, and submarines pass through it. The naval base in Gibraltar allows observing everything that moves between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. Britain understood this perfectly and is not going to give up such a trump card. Now imagine such a picture. Spain and Morocco agreed to build a tunnel. The route is laid, the money is found, the engineers are ready. But the tunnel passes near British territory. Whose permission is needed? Who will control security at the entrance? How will this affect the British military base? Any major project in this area automatically becomes a matter not of two, but of at least three parties, each of which has its own interests. And these are not all the unexpected facts. Many do not know that Europe is already physically present in Africa. On the Moroccan coast, there are two Spanish cities, Ceuta and Melilla. Real Spanish cities, with Spanish laws, Spanish passports, and Spanish shops, but standing right on the African continent. For most people, this is a real surprise. Ceuta and Melilla are part of the European Union. This means that their borders with Morocco are the external borders of the entire European Union. Barriers stand here, border guards work, and passport and customs control are in effect. It is through these cities that thousands of people from Africa and other regions try to get to Europe. This is one of the busiest migration corridors in the world. At the same time, Morocco has never officially recognized Spanish sovereignty over Ceuta and Melilla. The Moroccan side periodically raises this issue, hinting that these cities historically belong to it. So the relationship between Spain and Morocco is not just a relationship of neighbors. It is a complex story of mutual claims, which goes very poorly with the idea of a joint mega-project worth billions of euros. A separate big topic is migration. The Strait of Gibraltar is one of the main routes by which people try to reach Europe from Africa in small boats. This is a dangerous, deadly dangerous path. Hundreds of people die here annually. If a tunnel appeared, the nature of this flow would change, but the flow itself would not go anywhere. The point of control would simply shift, and new disputes would arise about who, how, and whom to let through. It is here that one important political truth is hidden, which is not usually spoken of openly. The absence of a direct crossing between Europe and Africa is beneficial for a number of states. Water works as a natural barrier. Ferries can be inspected, routes can be changed, and trips can be cancelled. All this can be managed. And a bridge or a tunnel is a constant connection that is much harder to regulate and almost impossible to shut down quickly. Today, regular ferry lines operate between Spain and Morocco. From the Spanish city of Algeciras to the Moroccan Tangier, it is about 1.5 hours at sea. Every year, millions of people use this route, especially in the summer, when Moroccans living and working in Europe go home to visit families. For them, this is a familiar and understandable road that has existed for decades. But what would change if a tunnel appeared? Imagine a train that departs from Madrid and in a few hours arrives in Casablanca, without transfers, without ferries, without wasting time at sea. It sounds like science fiction, but technically it is already almost real. Because Morocco has been actively building modern railways in recent years. In the year 2018, Morocco opened the first high-speed railway in Africa between Casablanca and Tangier. Tangier is located almost opposite Gibraltar. That is, the Moroccan side has actually already reached out towards Europe through modern transport. Only the last step remains, that very crossing through the strait. Spain, in its turn, has one of the best networks of high-speed trains in Europe. If the Spanish and Moroccan systems were connected through a tunnel, it would theoretically be possible to create a route from London or Paris to Marrakesh without a single transfer to a ferry. Such a route would change the tourist and cargo market between the two continents drastically. Supporters of the project speak of economic benefits. Direct land connection would reduce the cost of delivering goods from Africa to Europe and back. Morocco would turn into the main transit hub for cargo from all over the African continent. Investments would grow, jobs would appear, and tourism would liven up on both sides. But critics ask very practical questions. Who will pay for the maintenance of the tunnel for decades? How to divide the income from the passage? What will happen if a political conflict occurs between the countries and the tunnel is already built and working? All these questions require not engineering solutions, but political agreements, and ones that must hold firmly for many generations. It should be said honestly, even finding money for such a project is extremely difficult. The European Union could, in principle, participate in financing if the project were recognized as strategically important. But the European Union has never financed anything similar outside its borders on such a scale. For this, a political decision at the level of heads of state would be required, and not just an agreement of two neighboring countries. Even if the money were found, the next task would arise: new border points. The tunnel would require entire terminal complexes on both sides with customs, passport control, inspection zones, parking lots, and service rooms. These are separate construction projects, separate budgets, and separate years of work. And all this only so that the first passenger could enter the tunnel. The safety of the tunnel itself is also a separate, huge topic. A closed underground space almost 40 kilometers long is a very vulnerable object. Continuous surveillance systems, emergency exits at certain intervals, powerful firefighting systems, and clear evacuation plans are necessary there. Providing all this in a tunnel under the sea floor on the border of two continents is incomparably more difficult than in an ordinary city tunnel. There is another detail that is little spoken of. The area of the Strait of Gibraltar is a zone of very active naval activity. NATO ships are constantly on duty here. Submarines from different countries enter here, and continuous monitoring of ship movement is conducted here. Any tunnel would immediately become a strategic object that needs to be protected at the military level. And this is a completely new, separate layer of complexity. And it is not only about regional players. Major world powers also closely monitor what is happening at Gibraltar. Control over the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea is a question of global military strategy. Any serious changes in this region automatically become the subject of attention of world capitals. So even with the full agreement of Spain and Morocco, very interested observers would stand behind them. All this does not mean that humanity does not know how to build grandiose things. It knows, and how. The Suez Canal cut through the continent to connect two seas. The Panama Canal linked two oceans, passing through jungles and mountains. The Eurotunnel went under the sea floor and connected islands with the continent. Bridges in China step over mountain gorges several kilometers long. Man has always been able to rewrite geography when he really wanted to. The idea of the Eurotunnel between Britain and France was discussed for more than 150 years before it became a reality. The first serious project appeared as early as the 19th century. Either political distrust or wars or a lack of money or fear of the very idea interfered. But in the end, everything came together. Perhaps Gibraltar is simply still waiting for its moments. Technologies do not stand still. Modern tunnel boring machines work several times more efficiently than 20 years ago. New types of concrete are much better at resisting seawater and pressure. Computer modeling allows checking in advance how the construction will behave during an earthquake or a strong storm. With every year, technical obstacles become slightly less insurmountable. But the main obstacle, as often happens, is not technical. Spain and Morocco periodically return to negotiations about a possible tunnel. Joint research groups have worked since the 80s. Geological surveys were conducted, technical reports were published, and conferences were gathered. In the year 2016, both countries again confirmed interest in studying the project. But every time political disagreements turned out to be stronger than engineering plans. Behind these 14 kilometers stands everything. Hundreds of years of colonial history, unresolved territorial disputes, huge money, complex geology, military strategy of world powers, and questions of migration that have no simple answers. That is why the narrow strip of water on the map turns out to be much wider than it looks. If it was interesting, be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. This is very important for promotion.